One of history's most feared emperors, Genghis Khan was born in 1162 under the name Temujin. He was reportedly holding a blood clot in his hand when he was born, and for the shamanic societies of the time, this was a sign that he would become a great leader in the future. It is not clear exactly what kind of environment Temujin grew up in, as written records of the period are very scarce. But we do know that at that time the Mongols lived in fragmented tribes, sometimes forming temporary connections through the exchange of brides, but no one could unite them under a single rule. Temujin's father, Yasuge Batur, was a descendant of Kabul Kagan who had taken the first steps in this direction and had himself taken steps to unite the Mongols. But when Temujin was only 9 years old, the Tatars poisoned his father to death. After the death of his father, the leaders of his tribe abandoned him and his family. It was a Mongolian tradition that only the strong leader was to be followed, so Temujin was left to struggle for survival alone with his family in the harsh conditions of the Central Asian steppes. He suffered hunger and poverty and came close to death many times. One of the most important memories of his childhood was a fight he had with his half-brothers, Bekta and Bergute, who were stealing birds and fish from him and not sharing them. Temujin complained about this to his elders, but he was told that he had to get along with his brothers and was sent back. Finally, one day, Temujin, who was desperate together with his own brother Kasa, caught Bekta on a hill watching the horses and killed his half-brother with an arrow. Temujin, who grew up under these harsh conditions, eventually became one of the most feared conquerors of the world, who gathered all the Mongol tribes together and built the greatest empire in human history after the British Empire. He became Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan was not a name, it was a title meaning universal emperor or powerful and warlike emperor. Indeed, in just 25 years, Genghis Khan conquered as much land as the Roman Empire had conquered in 400 years. He built the largest empire in history whose territories were continuously interconnected. Of course, there are many stories to tell about Genghis Khan, but in this video we want to tell not the geographical size of the Mongol Empire, but the size that Genghis Khan's lineage reached, because a discovery made in 2003 brought up one of the most intriguing claims of the last 20 years, that 1 in every 200 men of Middle Asian origin may be a direct descendant of Genghis Khan. Who knows, maybe even you could be a direct descendant of Genghis Khan. But how could this happen? Let's see together. A group of researchers conducted a study on the Y chromosomes of 2,123 randomly selected men from Central Asia. At this point, it had nothing to do with Genghis Khan, but they noticed something very strange. 8% of these men, or in other words, 0.5% of all men in the world, had a specific haplotype. Haplotype is a term used with different meanings in science, but in general, a group of genes that tend to cluster together is called a haplotype. For example, if 20 to 30 gene variants often cluster together, they are called haplotypes. These clusters of clustered genes can also sometimes come together to form larger groups. Those are called haplogroups. In the end, researchers found that one chromosome, corresponding to about 16 million men spread across Central Asia, belonged to a large haplogroup, and that the common ancestor of this group lived 1,000 years ago. If we take the average human generation to be 25 years, that means only 40 generations ago, and given the conditions of the time and the geographical size of Central Asia, that's an absurdly fast gene spread. The researchers concluded that someone who lived 1,000 years ago and spread his genes over such a large area in Central Asia must have been a dominant ruler, and that the best candidate was Genghis Khan, and this is where the idea that most men are descendants of Genghis Khan comes from, given that the Y chromosome is a chromosome that can only be passed from father to son. We can say that anyone who is a direct son or direct grandson of Genghis Khan has contributed to the spread of this gene. One way or another, the study found that men from this lineage produced far more offspring than other men of the period. Researchers are divided on whether this is a big coincidence or group selection. To understand what group selection is, we must first understand the dynastic culture of the Mongol Empire. We know that Genghis Khan and his relatives made a special effort to spread this mighty lineage. For example, when Marco Polo visited the Mongol Empire, he found that Genghis Khan's grandson Kublai Khan had a household of 10,000 women. According to him, Kublai's concubines were in groups of 6, and they had sex with Kublai and served him for 3 days each. Every 3 days these women were changed. Look, this can no longer be seen as entertainment. The Mongols were trying to build a genetic dynasty, and this was reflected in the socio-politics of the time. If you were struggling to survive every day on the steppes of Central Asia 1,000 years ago, factors such as who you knew, who you could influence, and the number of people who supported you would really determine whether you would survive or not. For example, the Dzungar Khanate, who were themselves Mongols, were not protected and were destroyed by other Mongols who were descendants of Genghis Khan, simply because they were ruled by people who were not descendants of Genghis Khan. You see, being a descendant of Genghis or not being a descendant of Genghis was the line between life and death. And being a descendant of Genghis was a matter of pride. That's why the researchers who wrote the 2003 article think social selection or group selection is the reason that this Y chromosome haplotype has spread so widely. You can consider the group selection as like people who support the same football team, protecting and defending each other and attacking those who support the other team. The difference is the societies of that time were united not around a football team, but around the identity of being descendants of Genghis Khan. Yet from 2003 onwards, different research was done and things changed a bit. First of all, it was underlined that it must be remembered that this haplotype did not start with Genghis Khan. The haplotype found in just 8% of the group included in the study goes back to 1,000 years ago when Genghis Khan lived, and even this part is questionable because it is possible to date the haplogroup ancestor to different periods using different dating methods. For example, another study used a different method to show that the ancestor of the same gene group may have lived 2,000 years ago, not 1,000. But even if we assume that the ancestor of the 2,123 men in this study lived 1,000 years ago, we can trace the origins of this haplotype back to the Dongyue people living between eastern Mongolia and Manchuria in the 5th century BC. Even if this were the case, couldn't Genghis Khan and his descendants have spread this already existing genetics with tremendous speed? Maybe, but this part of the matter is also questionable, because one of the most important pieces of the original study is that the Hazara, an ethnic group that makes up 9% of Afghanistan, also has this gene, and none of the neighboring populations of the Hazara have this gene. Therefore, if this gene spread is related to Genghis Khan, it should have been possible to identify a period of time when Genghis Khan was in Afghanistan but did not spend time in the vicinity of Afghanistan. Researchers say this is strong evidence pointing to Genghis Khan, because Genghis Khan was actually in Afghanistan for a short period of time, and they say he has been with many women during this time. And in fact, today the Hazaras themselves claim that they are the descendants of Genghis Khan. While all this is not conclusive, there are bigger problems. In 2012, a study was done on people who were not descendants of Genghis Khan, but of Dayan Khan, one of his descendants who lived in the 15th century, and they did not have the same haplotypes in their genes. Another study in 2019 analyzed hundreds of years of official genealogical records of a wealthy Chinese Liu family and found that they were indeed descendants of Kholgen, one of the sons of Genghis Khan. It was therefore expected to find a haplotype of Genghis Khan's supreme gene in these people, but when their genes were analyzed, the same haplotype was not found. In another study in 2018, something even stranger happened. These haplotypes were found in the genes of people who were definitely not descendants of Genghis Khan. So, the idea that Genghis Khan managed to spread his genes to 1 out of every 200 men is highly doubtful and probably completely false. Nevertheless, the only proof that would end all these debates would be to find the grave of Genghis Khan, because no one has the gene map of Genghis Khan. For this reason, the scientific world is trying to reach the ancestor from the descendants, whereas if the genes of the ancestor were known, it would be much easier to find the descendants from there. Of course, we may never find the grave of this great conqueror because Genghis Khan and his close relatives had willed that their burial places should not be known. It is even said that all the soldiers who went to the burial site of Genghis and everyone who saw them were killed, so that the secret could be kept as secret, and then thousands of horses were driven across the land around the burial site to destroy all traces of them. And unfortunately, despite dozens of archaeological excavations to date, the burial site has not been found. I would like to end the video with a call to my young friends. Finding the grave of an important historical character like Genghis Khan would make you an archaeology and science superstar, and you could be the one to do it. Don't stop. Start researching and learning science and technology right now. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe to our channel to watch much more interesting videos. See you in the next video.